Welcome. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar hosted by the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. My name is Victor Trinidad with NCPMI. This webinar is part of the Unpacking Coaching webinar series, and today's topic is the Canary in the Coal Mine, looking within to address common challenges with coaching, hosted by Megan von der Emps, Sarah Bassler, and Abby Taylor. Thank you very much, and please proceed.
Hey, good afternoon. It is so wonderful to have you all here for our Unpacking Coaching webinar at NCPMI. We're grateful that you carved out some time in your busy schedule to join us today. So I have the pleasure of introducing our two incredible panelists, Abby and Sarah. They're going to share a little bit about themselves in just a moment, but I do want to acknowledge that over the years, they have poured so much of their professional hearts and talents into not only enhancing the impact of coaching within the pyramid model, but also making the experience of coaching truly something meaningful. So today we want to give you as coaches that you join this webinar kind of a little gift, a little space to pause, reflect, and walk away with some actionable ideas to reflect on your own practice. The inspiration from today's session comes from a session that Sarah and Abby hosted at NTI along with their other colleague, Brandy, which myself, I had the opportunity to attend, and so did some of our other NCPMI staff members. And we left feeling that session at our conference so energized by the insights and this focus on coach reflection, which is something that we know is easy to skip or like feel like you can't fit it in the midst of our busy professional schedules. So we hope you find this time today kind of as inspirational and refreshing as we did. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, Sarah and Abby, as they get us started today.
All right. Hi. Welcome, everyone. Megan, a little goosebumps, a little teary-eyed there. Thank you for that really kind introduction. We are really excited to be here to share this content with you. It sort of, I think, took on a life of its own. Felt very meaningful at NTI, and we're glad to be able to share it again. My name is Abby Taylor. I currently work at the Wisconsin Alliance for Infant Mental Health, where I support statewide implementation of the pyramid model, as well as our developing Healthy Minds, Healthy Children infant mental health consultation mentorship program and support for the state. So I'm really excited to come back and work with my colleagues who I used to work with at Vanderbilt and USF to present with you all today. So Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Abby. I'm Sarah Bassler, and I work at Vanderbilt University in the Hemitter Research Lab. And the research that we do in our lab focuses primarily on coaching, so supporting teachers, mainly to use pyramid model practices. So I do all kinds of things related to coaching coaches. And in my past life, I was a teacher and an administrator. And I always say, and now I'm a parent and I use pyramid model at home. So it just feels very full circle to me. This work is means a lot to me. And I'm just really excited to be here with my colleagues and share this information with you. All right. So we wanted to start out by giving you the opportunity to kind of connect with us. Like we can't see you, you can see us, but we want you to utilize the webinar chat. Tell us the vibe that you're giving today. What are you feeling? We've got, maybe you're feeling like a pigeon with zero brain waves or a toasty cinnamon roll. How are you feeling today? You can pop that in the chat. I'm feeling kind of like a toasty cinnamon roll because I really like the opportunity when I get to be with Abby. As she mentioned, we used to work together, and now she's in Wisconsin, so I don't get to see her as much. So whenever we're together, it always makes me feel warm and toasty. What about you, Abby?
I was gonna pick that one partially because I had a cinnamon roll last night for dessert, a special one that was left over like from my birthday that we forgot to eat. So anyway, that's really funny. What is everyone else picking? Let's see.
Everybody, so I'm seeing cold pizza, broken Game Boy. I mean, I'm seeing them all. Not really cinnamon roll. Most pizza are feeling kind of like the pigeon, the broken Game Boy, or the pigeon. So
I like the silly sock too. That's
yes,
fun. We'll see how
yeah,
everyone if it changes over the course
yeah.
of the hour.
Maybe by the end you'll feel like a small rat in a party hat. Hopefully, ready to party and use some of these strategies. Okay, thanks for sharing, guys. So today, we're going to dig into this analogy and we're going to hit this analogy hard. We're going to say canary probably 50 times or more throughout this training. So just get ready. But we're going to dig in and explain what we mean when we talk about this canary in the coal mine analogy. We're going to dig into how you can create a space where you can have compassion for those that you're coaching and be reflective of your own practice. We're going to talk about some common challenges or canaries and some possible solutions that Abby and myself have faced or some challenges that we hear in the field that others kind of for time and time again say, this keeps happening, and talk through some of those. And we're going to also give you a resource that you can utilize maybe back home for yourself or with a group of coaches to kind of guide you in your reflecting about these practices. So when we say canary in the coal mine, this is an analogy. So back a long time ago, when there was lots of coal mining going on, coal miners would actually send or in a cage, put a canary in a coal mine, and that would tell them if the canary lived, it was safe for them to be in the coal mine, that there weren't toxic fumes because canaries are smaller and more, you know, sensitive to changes in the environment. So this analogy, the canary in a coal mine, is often an early warning sign of danger. And so as we are referring to it in this webinar, we're talking about coaching canaries. And so we want to think about what are those early warning signs for you as a coach that there's something wrong or something that might need to change in your coaching practice. And so today we'll dig into some ideas and some topics, and it's not meant to shame. Like we'll say some phrases or say what it might sound like, what you might be saying in your head about certain coaching scenarios. And it's not meant to shame you because I'll be honest, I have said some of these things myself, but it's really about, oh, if I've felt this way or I've thought this way, how can I reframe that so that I can be the best coach that I can be? And we know that you're out there doing the best that you can, but sometimes it helps us just to kind of reframe. All right. So another chat box. We're hitting the chat box hard in the beginning. Use the chat box and please let us know what are some of the common canaries or coaching challenges that you're facing in your coaching. So use the chat. Staff turnover. That is a very prevalent, common theme right now. Honest reflection, right? It's hard to reflect honestly and be vulnerable. The time to do it, the follow through is hard. Buy-in, buy-in and staff turnover. Oh, they're coming in fast now. So we're getting a lot of reflections. Commitment of teachers to working on those goals. Oh, this is a new one. Parents that are maybe have high demands, like parents are expecting a lot. Um, and so a lack of support from leadership, closing the loop in the cycle. So we're seeing a lot of common themes here. And I will say that these are things that we hear a lot too. These are things that are not uncommon. Most coaches struggle to with all of these things. So you are in a safe space, and we appreciate you sharing that. And the good news is that some of the things that you mentioned, we're going to dig into and give you some possible solutions for how to combat those. Right.
Yeah, many of those are in our list that we'll get to that Sarah will share in just a little bit. So we just want to kind of start with a little bit of grounding. So sometimes the challenges or the canaries we face have more internal root causes. They can come from our own lack of awareness around how we're reacting when we face challenges, or they can come from our own lack of awareness and acknowledgement of the fact that the people we're working with are also facing challenges every day that we might not be able to see. And I'm sure you've seen this iceberg as it relates to challenging behavior, but we don't often think about it in relation to adults and to our colleagues. But the same message is true, right? So when we're facing canaries in our coaching relationships, it's really important to give ourselves the space and tools to reflect on the fact that the canaries we face aren't always things that we can see, or the root cause of those aren't always things that we can see. And the canaries or challenges might not always be things we recognize in ourselves, let alone in others. So there might be these underlying things, and we don't really understand how they're connected to our reaction to things or someone else's behavior. So giving ourselves the space to reflect on those sticking points so we can maybe try to connect them can help us be able to move forward with really more information that might actually be helpful to get past some of these challenges. So when we're facing these canaries, we really need to give ourselves time to reflect on the fact that the canaries we face aren't always things we can control either. So sometimes the challenges we face are below that iceberg and also outside of what we can control. So they can come from how we're reacting in moments when we're facing challenges. And there's many things like coaching policies, schedules that teachers have, expectations placed on us from administration. Maybe it's the culture around coaching within the program that we can't just wake up one morning and change, right? All by ourselves. But what we do have control over is how we show up for that coaching conversation. So when we get stuck in feelings of frustration, it's really easy to freeze. And when we're frozen, one way to help us get unstuck is to just find even one thing that might be in your control. So I love this visual because it shows you, right? Like, what are some of the things that might be in my control? So even though I can't change people's perceptions of coaching, I might be able to ask questions about like how they're feeling about coaching, or I might be able to choose where I put my effort next, or those kinds of things. So I love the choices inside because we all need reminders, right, about what things are within our control. But and while some people have a tendency to freeze, I think others of us, including myself, might be prone to more action bias. So we might focus on controlling too many things. And sometimes those things are outside of that circle of things that we can actually control. So I think this visual can be helpful for that as well. So if you're prone to like be like, I'm going to try to do all the things so that I'm making sure that coaching is going well, or I'm controlling the scenario, right? We can kind of reassess and think, okay, first of all, it's probably not working in the way that we that we hope. It might not actually be addressing some of those canaries. But it also just leads to burnout, stress, overwhelm for us as the coach, and can further damage that partnership your coachee. So a big shout out to my colleague Anne at the Wisconsin Alliance for Infant Mental Health who brought this visual to me because I now use it all the time. I think it's very helpful to have in your pocket. So having those tools to draw ourselves back to our circle of control and this iceberg concept is part of what you might think of as getting rooted in our shared humanity. It's part of having a strong foundation and that strong ground that helps us feel better prepared to jump into challenging conversations, better prepared to more productively connect to our coachees. So we have to start there, right? One thing we can think about is this concept Brene Brown calls locking through and locking in. So in some of her research for her most recent book, she shares about how we often spend so much time worried about the locking in and focusing on the activities we're doing. So in coaching, that might mean feeling like we're totally locked into a conversation about what we saw or didn't see in an observation and about what we think someone should or shouldn't be doing to be more effective. We're very quick to think that this is the only thing we should be worried about when we come to a coaching conversation. And that focusing, locking in, and getting our point across will mean that somehow we've been effective or successful in our coaching. But I'm not sure about you. I realized after I've read more and more about this concept of locking through, which is another way of saying, of giving myself and others the space and time we need to transition into a conversation, into a space, the time they need to shake off whatever came before, to decompress their sensory system. In this research about locking through versus locking in, you find that not locking through actually compromises our ability to lock in. So when we have all these things going on under the iceberg that are weighing on us, and we've had a really hard day, we can't effectively lock in to our next activity. And this is sometimes where coaching canaries can show up, right? So we really have to give ourselves the space and time to think about this locking through concept. One example of this that I think about a lot in the classroom is with a teacher, right? So think about how a teacher might feel after they've been responsive to 13 kids all morning. They're sweating, trying to get their kids to nap. She's finally trying to sit down so she can just chat with you. And you get there, you make it, it's quiet. But think about how that must feel. And some of us probably were that teacher, right? Before we became coaches. You're not actually there and calm in that quiet space right there in that moment. It takes a little while. People who are operating under that intense cognitive load and that stress of having to be hyper aware for extended periods of time, they require even more discrete and intentional time to transition from one activity to the next. So without doing that, without giving that proper time, we experience this sort of like residue or like leftover space that makes it hard to lock into our next activity. So sometimes a canary we might notice is someone not being able to engage productively in a coaching session. Maybe you notice someone's really closed off with their answers, with their reflection. You're trying to ask the best reflection questions and there's just like one word answers, right? I mean, I feel like I've spent a lot of time trying to think about that. Or maybe there's like really extensive venting that needs to happen. And we don't want to wait until there's a canary to then say, oh, hey, we might need to pause and like give ourselves some transition time. And it might not always be really obvious disengagement. So people who are experiencing this like residue from this time of being very, locked in and hyper aware, like teachers have to be, if they're experiencing that, they're not necessarily going to be as productive or successful in the task that they're trying to then lock into next if we don't deliberately engage in recovery and that locking through time. So it's really, really important to think about what people need because we all need different things, right? And we all have to make sure that we learn to recognize and acknowledge when we need it and what might work for us. So something that happened with me personally, And the more I reflect on this, the more I'm realizing different moments in my life when this has become, an issue or a canary, a challenge for me. So when I'm really good at locking in. I consider myself really, really good at locking in. In fact, I have a tendency to like skip right through the locking through part and I'm like in the zone, which means sometimes when I show up to things, I'm like not even asking like, "Hey, how are you?" um, which I don't mean to be intentionally like rude. That's just like where my brain is. So when I started teaching 14 years ago, I really would get hyper focused in the mornings on setting up my classroom, getting everything prepared, being ready, doing my checklist. But I always struggled with the relationship piece with co-teachers and other staff. And not having these relationships would then make it difficult for me to lead or coach and guide staff when they would come into my classroom. So I would struggle, right? I'd go to my director and I'd say, no one will listen to me. No one is on board with what I want to do. We're not using best practices. Why won't anyone do what I want them to do? Right? And I think we feel that way sometimes as coaches, right? Why won't they do the practices? They're not using them. And it's hard to get past that sometimes. But one of the best pieces of advice she shared with me in that moment was really simple. And she said, I noticed that you lock in so intensely that sometimes you come in the morning and you don't even like say hi to the people passing you by in the hallway, and that maybe your colleagues, you know, could use like a deep breath and a hey, how are you? How was your morning? Glad you're here before you jump into like your classroom plans for the day. And I was like, I thought that was like the most amazing piece of advice, which sounds very simple now, but that's that piece of making sure that we're accounting for that locking through with people in a way that works for them, right? Um, so this is one way to consider how we plan for locking through. So in your coaching sessions, it might be really important to have time set aside at the beginning. And I know time is hard, I know, but it's going to help your coaching sessions in the long run, right? So planning for intentional mindfulness opportunities or asking your coachee, hey, what might be helpful for you? Like you've had a really stressful morning. If we had, set a 2-minute timer, what's going to be most useful to you in, sort of recovering your sensory system, feeling ready to move forward? What's going to help you today? And these are just some options to keep, I think, keep handy and to offer people just to open up the conversation about it. It might not be one of these things that works for your coachee or for you, and it doesn't have to be the same every time, right? It's just like when we offer kids like, how do you want to say hi to someone this morning? It's the same type of activity, but it can really go a long way in terms of just showing up and showing someone that you're ready to be in the same space as them by pausing to do one of these activities together or to give each other the space to do one of these things that works for them. So, because I know this doesn't just happen because now you've heard me say it, we wanted to give you some questions that will help you reflect on this, both for yourself and with your coachees. So thinking about just what's going to help you transition to a new activity or task. How do you know when like maybe you skipped over that locking through piece and you might need a little more space and time to do that? Um, so hopefully these questions can help you in that reflection. So, you ready, Sarah? Deep breath. We're
Yeah.
transitioning now.
Transitioning. Let's take some deep breaths.
Yes,
Now, I do want to
exactly.
just say something. Someone mentioned icebreakers have been really helpful for some staff. Nicolette says, whom I already have a relationship with. And I think sometimes we get a little like to some people, this kind of, especially if you're like Abby was describing, like you lock in and you're like, I don't have time for all this woo-woo stuff, right? Like we gotta, come on, tell me what to do, right? But what I think, we need to remember is that sometimes it feels a little strange and to do some of these activities. But in my experience, sometimes I feel like strange. I used to feel strange to do like a breathing exercise, or something like that. Or I've had like people that I've coached that are kind of like, ugh, I don't have time for this, right? But what happens is that when you make time for it, then it's like one of those things like you didn't realize you needed it until you did it and it becomes part of your practice. Um, and so I think it's okay to try it out and try different things like Gabby was saying. So now we're going to shift and talk about common canaries and how you might respond. And so some of these, we're going to give you a few ideas for like of what you might do. It's not exhaustive list. We realize that it's coaching is so individual, right? Like these things are going to look different based on who you're coaching. But these are some ideas that we've brainstormed as a team that we have seen be helpful. Um, this one came up right away when we were asking you, what is one of your challenges? Coachee buy-in, right? So this coachee doesn't want my support. They think they're doing it. Maybe they don't believe in the practices that you're doing, right? Like, I've coached a teacher before that was like, I've been doing this longer than you were born, right? So when you get that feeling of like they're already not bought in to either coaching or to the practices. Um, so here are some ideas for how we might push through. Um, so I think sometimes with coaching, we lock in before we've locked through, and they don't even understand what coaching is, right? So this very first piece is so important. We want to make sure that they understand what coaching is. And, I know this is like step one. It's like coaching 101. Like we know we've got the agreement, Sarah. But do they really understand what's happening with coaching, what that's going to look like, how we're going to interact? Because sometimes they don't, and that's why they're not bought in, right? Like they told me we were going to coach, but they didn't tell me how long it was going to last and if this was going to be forever or what this is going to look like. Another thing is it's important to offer choices. Sometimes we just come in, and especially if we come into a situation where maybe the director at our program is like, you need to coach them on XYZ, and you're kind of already siloed into this thing that I'm coaching them on, right? And so it feels like, well, there's not choice, right? But there's always room for choice. It's how they can do it, what materials they use. They may not have choice in what the practice is or the practices are, but the way that they do it, there is ways to infuse choice. Um, and really, just all the things that Abby was saying, like getting to know them, being a kind person, like all this happens in the context of a collaborative partnership. And if we skip over that, we're going to damage that partnership and we might see a canary right away, or it might come up later. Yeah. So our next canary is this fixer trap. And I've done the fixer trap many times where you go into a scenario and you're like, oh my goodness, there are so many things that need to be fixed, right? Like, I don't know where to start. I'm going to just throw everything at them, right? We're going to jump right in. We're going to move forward. It can feel like, you might say like, well, if they would just do it this way, if they would just do it the way that I want them to, then we wouldn't be having this issue. But sometimes when we are in that fixer mode, we take out that other person, right? We're just plowing forward with our agenda. We're trying to fix them or fix the classroom or fix whatever's going on. And we haven't really seen that person as a human or taken their thoughts or concerns into to mind, and that can cause a rift or a canary. So some suggestions is is what you're working on something that they wanted to work on? Or did we offer choice in some way? Or did I come in and say, here's your action plan, right? And that feels very similar to like what we just talked about with choice. But it comes in with this fixer trap as well. Sometimes we are overwhelming our coachee, right? Instead of taking one practice at a time or meeting our coachee where they are, we're either working on a practice that is so far from where they are in implementation that they're overwhelmed. Or maybe we're throwing too many practices at them at once. So it's important that you take a step back and really, maybe reevaluate with your coachee. What would you like to work on first? Right. This next one I saw overwhelmingly, right? Time for coaching. That comes in through either time. One second. Sorry, guys. I had a little helper pop in.
This is real life, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, Abby. I'm sure if we could see everyone, they would probably have helpers, classrooms, all, and you're getting love from
Yep.
little emojis coming up. So
Yes.
all
So
good,
that was
Sarah.
my little 5-year-old decided that he needed help with his play talking book right now. Um, but back at this idea, time for coaching. So this can come up. Our coaches are saying they don't have time for coaching. This could look like you as the coach saying, I don't have time for coaching. I have so many other jobs or responsibilities on my plate. I can't get a full cycle in. I might be able to observe, but I'm not able to debrief, or they're always canceling on me. I can never get coaching in. So some suggestions for how this might look or how we might adjust our practice would be really to think about, when are you deciding to meet? I know it seems like, coaching 101, right? Have we selected a time that works for everyone? But a lot of times we haven't, right? And I know that when you have a large caseload, that gets even harder to manage, right? Because I only have this time to meet, or I'm only at this center on this day. But really consider, is this a time that's feasible for them? It could be that they're not able to lock into your conversation because they're thinking about, well, I've got to go cover this class after this, or I'm worried that my coaching session's not going to end in time for me to go get my child at childcare, right? So think about when you're meeting and is it a feasible time? Another flip side of that is that I don't have time to meet. So I hear that a lot from the coach's perspective of like, I can't close out the cycle or we don't have time to meet. But think about those times that coachees are already um, all together. So think staff meetings. Could you steal away 10 minutes at a staff meeting when they're already expected to be there? Or maybe during nap time. Now, I know we had the scenario earlier where it was like, I can't focus because this is my first second where I haven't had responsibilities. But think about those times when we have coachees, on site or they're already meeting. Can we utilize some of that time? Um, you also want to make sure that you've thought about different types of coaching or different types of ways of delivering coaching, right? So maybe individual coaching is not going to work, and maybe it's never going to work. May not work yet, right? Because of the demands. Consider doing a different format like group or peer coaching, right? Or maybe setting up a combination of all those things. Maybe you have a coachee that would work better with some one-on-one support, and then you have a group of coachees that would do better with a group format. So it's not one size fits all, and sometimes it has to be changing or hybrid. And think about how you implement each component, right? It's of PBC. So you don't, if you can't physically get into a classroom to do an observation, maybe consider video. Maybe that's the problem, is that you're always in a classroom and you can't get out of the classroom to meet. Maybe you utilize written feedback or email feedback. So this QR code will take you to a handout that we created for another professional development, where it kind of walks you through how to set coaching up from the get-go and how to kind of structure your program. And then it has some ideas for how to get these different pieces of PBC in creatively so that you don't drop the cycle, so that you can kind of complete a cycle. And this one, conflict avoidance. We have all probably been in a situation where we're like, oh my goodness, this is above my pay grade, or I'm not maybe qualified to handle this, or this feels big and I don't want to deal with it, right? So maybe something's coming up that you're not comfortable with dealing with. So we avoid it. But what happens is if we constantly avoid things instead of addressing them, or acknowledging them at least, then sometimes that will come up with, maybe we had a coachee that was bought in and now they're like, well, I'm not bought in because my coach isn't helping me, or they're not talking to me about the things I want to talk about. So we have to be brave and we have to address them. And these are some of the ways that we could do that. It can help by being reflective and asking questions about what's going on. It's possible that maybe what you were working on is not important anymore, right? I've definitely worked with teachers where we were working on like a class-wide practice and we had some challenging behavior pop up, or a particular child that needed more individualized support. So we had to shift the goal, or really focus in on how can we support this child to be successful, and then we'll go back to the class wide, or do those things simultaneously. But it starts with having that conversation and getting an understanding about what they need and how we can kind of maintain their focus. Also, be honest, right? If it's something that you're not sure about, say, let's figure it out together, or let me ask someone who has dealt with this before. I mean, I used to phone Abby all the time. Like, I'd be like, hey, Abby, this is coming up. I'm not sure how to handle this. What are your ideas, right? I think becoming vulnerable just shows that you're human. And I think we worry, being in the role of a coach, that saying we don't know something takes away our credibility. But really what it does, or in my experience, when I'm working with people that are honest enough to be vulnerable and say, I don't know something, I respect them more than if they were to just avoid or tell me something that wasn't helpful.
For sure.
So,
I was just going to add to that, if that's okay, because
yeah.
I think sometimes we think that we are supposed to have all the answers as coaches, when I think in reality we're there to like create the space for teachers to sort of uncover what it is that they need. And usually that does lead to pretty good understanding from the teacher themselves about what practices they might need, or what areas they might want to work on, and those kinds of things. So that, I think, goes hand in hand with that vulnerability and that piece of like, hey, I'm not here to tell you like exactly what you need to do next steps. I'm here to help figure it out together. And I think even just like continuing to impart that can go such a long way in with buy-in, with trying out new things, all of that stuff. So anyway, thanks for sharing those suggestions. Yay. Do you want me to transition now? This is
Yeah, so we've talked about some of the things that you brought up, some of the things that we heard from the field are common canaries, and we gave you some solutions. And some of you are going to be thinking, well, Sarah, I've done all those things and it's still not working.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
now Abby's going to kind of talk through what do we do if it just keeps happening?
Right. So when we've done everything right and we're still bumping up against canaries, because some canaries are really loud and persistent or strong, and they can still make it through deep, thick smog or whatever, to go back to that analogy. So if this is the case, it's really important to stay curious or get back to being curious about what's coming up for you related to these canaries. Are they canaries for you and your coachee? Or are they canaries that only you seem stuck by? What feelings are coming up for you in these situations? And what are those feelings or your reactions to these canaries communicating to the coachee, right? So one strategy that can be helpful is, like Sarah said, to be vulnerable and honest and narrating your own feelings of stuckness. So saying out loud, I'm feeling stuck right now. I really want to be able to help, but I'm struggling. So let's work on this together, or let's think through this together. Um, I think that can be really powerful. And it's okay if you don't leave that session with the exact answer, right? We're just trying things and we're moving forward together. So I'll never forget the coaching video from PBC training where the coach is really, it's set up that the coach is really worried about having that conversation about a red flag, like so worried. And then all she ended up needing to say was, "Can you tell me a little bit about when this happened today?" And she like mentions what happened, and the teacher just like immediately says, "I just didn't know what else to do." And I think it's okay to have these feelings when we're stuck in coaching too, to open it back up to the teacher as the expert of her own learning and say, "I'm feeling a little stuck around our current plan. What are your thoughts about how we might be able to move forward?" You really never know what might be under that iceberg holding you or your coachee back from effectively communicating until you hold the space for it. So learning when and how to share your own in the moment feelings when you're in that deadlock can be really, I know, hard, but really important. So we created this resource for you because we know all of this is really easier said than done. And remembering to reflect like this, remembering to hold space for those unspoken parts of our coach and coachee relationship is really hard. And when we're always going, we're always on to the next to do. So we wanted to provide this like reflection guide that you can use with yourself, with other coaches or other leaders in your program, whatever speaks to you. And we're just hoping that it can help you kind of go back to some of the things that we talked about today and just try to remember that when we want to bulldoze our way through change and growth, there's really not a shortcut. And reflection and slowing down to face those canaries is the way to deep, sustainable change that will hopefully support your coaching relationships along the way. So I hope everyone should be, that's available on the website. I know when you go to the webinar page, and hopefully, I don't know if we shared resources in the chat, but I'll let Megan and Sarah handle that. So there's this last little tidbit. So even with all of that, we might still find that we've tried it all. We've been vulnerable. We've really done all of these things. And it's really important to remember that we don't always have what a professional needs in a given time, and that that's okay. So coaching might not always be the right answer at the right time for an individual. And if you find yourself that like you've created those shared expectations, you've given space for locking through and building relationship, you've shared your vulnerability, and you both still find yourself at an impasse, there's a time and a place to say, hey, maybe there's different support that's going to better serve you right now. Let me help you find that. So even when, when we're wearing our coaching hat, even if we bring that infant mental health lens to our coaching, there's still a difference between coaching and mental health consultation and what someone might be able to get out of each. So it's okay to stay in your lane. It's okay to help a teacher access different support. So this is just something to remember when like every coaching session maybe becomes something different than, becomes about something different than coaching. Ultimately, being comfortable and confident to say, this might not be the right time to be coached, but I want to show up for you. What does support look like for you right now? These gestures can let professionals know or coachees know that like your number one priority is actually them and not just like their teapot scores. That it's really about their humanity and their needs and your shared space together. So if I feel like if that becomes your North Star, whether you are actually addressing the canary or have to change direction completely, you will be successful in your relational support of that teacher. And ultimately, that's what's going to help that teacher feel more confident and competent in their ability to support social and emotional development for children and families. So I hope that that resonates and helps you feel a little more at ease about, all the effort that we put in every day to be in there for people. So, all
And I
right.
love I
Oh,
love that you mentioned, staying in your own lane. I think it can be really hard sometimes, especially as a coach. And I know if you're like me and Abby, sometimes we want to help, like we're helpers, right? And sometimes it morphs into something that is like, I might not be the right person for the support. So I love that you
absolutely.
mentioned that.
Thank you. All right. These are our contact info, but I am gonna stop sharing while we do questions and answers. Is that okay?
Sounds
That would
great.
that would be great. So there is, just to remind everyone, a place and there's a Q&A section where you can ask specific questions. This is not in the question box, but this came up in the chat. I was trying to watch those many like challenges around coaching. And while you did such a beautiful job of, I think, touching on all those canaries that can occur, there were a few that came up that I know the two of you might have some ideas for. And that's this idea of like participation or what might be seen as commitment during coaching sessions. And so I know as coaches, we sometimes find ourselves in these spaces with maybe practitioners who are more either quiet in coaching sessions or we feel like we're like having to like extract information, and that came up, that participation in the coaching cycle. I was wondering if you had any reflections or just ideas similar to how you shared for those other canaries. I think that was something I think will just be helpful to touch on.
So, I mean, I'll talk about a little bit about how I've approached it, and Abby, jump in and share how, because I bet we approach it probably a little differently. But I tend to, I mean, well, so I think first and foremost, it starts with how we set up, right? That clear, transparent about what this is and what this looks like and how we're going to engage, and that it's going to take some reflection and engagement from you, and this is what I'm going to do to support that. But say you did all that, or maybe we didn't do that, and here we are, and they're not participating, right? I really try to get more direct with my questioning. So asking really specific questions. I think sometimes we ask really broad, kind of open, very, very open questions feels overwhelming. So pulling apart different aspects can get them more reflective or make it easier, because sometimes they're the pigeon with zero brainwaves when you're
Mhm.
needing to reflect, and they're like, I don't know what happened. Like, so sometimes it can be helpful to have more direct reflections to get them going. And I've also been in a situation before where I've said, like, I feel like you're having a hard time. Sometimes I'll just be direct. Like, I feel like
But
we're having a hard time. Is this a bad time to meet? Should we meet it? So those sorts of things. What do you think, Abby?
Yeah, I think those are great ideas. I was thinking, I was like going backwards in the relationship building piece. So I think those things are absolutely valid, and I have tried those. And I wonder about if it's something that's happening repeatedly, like shifting something about like maybe like about our relationship building. So maybe like coming in and like having your coaching session while you're like offering to help like rearrange the classroom or cut materials, or like I think I would think about building relationship with the teacher outside of whenever, like not just trying to get answers during a coaching session, and maybe seeing if that like are they always closed down and shy or quiet, or is it like just about pyramid model content? So I think that's one thing. And so like those check-ins like that are not about work, that are like fun and silly, I think that's a good way to like, bring your favorite song. That's something my colleague does is she'll like start a meeting by just like playing a song. I feel like coming in and being like, I heard this today and it just like made me move. Like just to like lighten the sense of like, I don't know, it just feels so serious sometimes,
Yeah.
like in our work. So I don't know if that would, I think a combination of those things would probably help you understand a little bit about what's going on better too. Like it
I
would
think
help you
that's
narrow
really
in.
helpful.
Yeah.
That shifting demand, like the lowering the demand
Yes.
of when you have those coaching conversations is really
Yeah.
important. So here's a kind of a fun question I'm going to ask you. We have a few I'm watching time, but you all have been coaching. You have a lot of expertise years. And someone asked a question. They've been coaching 2 months and they're just wondering what would be like your brief advice to a new coach? This is a fun question. So we can kind of think about that. Just your best piece of advice that you would pass on to a new coach.
You want to go first, Abby?
Not really.
Okay. Well, I think something that I have had to learn is to listen, to listen and wait. Because I'm like, I jump into action, I do the fixer trap, like, okay, I've got the ideas, let's do this, right? And I think sometimes listening and validating experiences of others and honoring their experiences, because I think sometimes people come into coaching, especially like the teacher who told me she'd been doing it longer than I had been born, like she'd been teaching longer than I had been born, right? She probably felt invalidated in her years of experience to have someone younger than her coming in to coach. So honoring their knowledge, honoring their wisdom, listening. Yeah.
That's helpful advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really helpful. I love that your advice is very like practical and like applied to like the coaching session. Because my first thought was like, I think I would say to have more fun, like on it. Like, oh, was it? Okay, good. That makes me feel better. I was like, I don't spend enough time like just getting to know someone like personally first, like, and giving space for that. Because I don't know. But so fun. Enjoy your time.
Mhm.
Well, it's the context, right? It's
Right.
this is how everybody learns, is in the
Hmm.
context of relationships.
Right.
Thanks for imparting that kind of wisdom to our new coaches. I'm going to do one question, and I don't know if we'll have time for both of you to respond. But this is kind of a readiness question. I think leadership teams can often look to the coach in one of those canaries as the fixer. So, like, oh, that's something for a classroom coach to talk about, or let's make it part of coaching. And what we think about in preparing teachers for coaching and leadership teams to start coaching in programs is that we can't coach every teacher at once. And not every teacher might have, or every practitioner has that readiness right away for coaching. And so that was the question posed, kind of like any guidance that coaches can give their leadership teams about kind of like starting coaching or helping the leadership team not kind of reinforce that canary that the coach is the person on the team who can fix.
Yeah. Sarah, I feel like you probably have a lot of really good advice about how to do this, but something that came up today, actually, we were doing a data review about like from a staff survey about what staff are asking for from their leadership teams.
Mhm.
And there were so many comments about wanting people to come into the classroom and model, show them what to do. And I don't think that that needs to only be coaches. If you're a director who's been a teacher before and you are trained in pyramid model practices, like spend time in the classrooms and show some of these strategies and stuff. I think so as a leadership team, I think thinking about how are we all living pyramid model practices and showing those every day might be one thing that I would recommend. Go
And
ahead, Sarah.
transparency, right?
Yeah.
Transparency and making it non-evaluative. I've worked with so many
Mhm.
programs that they're like, we do that. We have a coaching contract and they don't, it's non-evaluative, but it's like then we get down to how are you selecting people for coaching and when you get down to it, it does feel punitive. So I think like being really clear, like we do coaching and we do coaching because of XYZ. And, you know, really when you say it's not punitive, like really ensuring that it's not punitive, right? And that everyone who wants coaching can get coaching in some capacity. Not saying everyone needs it, but I think sometimes we say coaching is reserved for the neediest teachers or the teachers that have the most going on, and sometimes they're not quite in the space yet to get coaching, and we might have more buy-in if we start with people who want the support too. So, you know,
That's
transparency. It's my favorite word.
It's a great word. And to be transparent about time, I'm going to pass it off to Victor to end our time together. Thank you, Sarah and Abby, for sharing your time with us today, for answering our questions, and for engaging us.
All right. Thank you so very much for all of our attendees. Thank you so very much to our panelists for their wonderful insights. Your feedback is very important to the work that we do. Please remember to provide your feedback on this webinar with our post-webinar survey by typing the web address shown on this slide into your internet browser. Your certificate of attendance will appear once you submit the survey. We invite you to visit our website, challengingbehavior.org, to sign up for our upcoming webinars, access recordings, download pyramid model resources, and more. Thank you to our funder for making this webinar possible. This concludes our webinar. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.